Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Paul Jay in Baltimore. With Donald Trump's victory, the president-elect is being met by thousands of people on the streets saying, "You're not my president." But a lot of people at home watching TV, in fact, voted and said, he is going to be our president. And given the American electoral system, so it is. Everyone's trying to make some sense of it. It surprised most people, not everyone. But the big question a lot of people are trying to answer is, why did sections of the working class vote for Trump when it seems, in the most objective sense, I think, that his policies really aren't all that good for the working class? And now helping us sort some of this out, and also what some of the response to this is going to be coming from trade unions and the progressive left, is joining me in the studio is Michael Lighty. He's the Director of Public Policy for the National Nurses United and the California Nurses Association. He's served on the Oakland Planning Commission, on Community Education and Political Organizations Board of Directors. He was the first openly LGBTQ commissioner for the Port of Oakland. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Paul.
So first of all, what's your assessment of Trump? If we understand the exit poll math correctly, and who knows yet, it's not a science anyway, and you know, who trusts pollsters these days anyway, but the numbers I've seen is that in the income bracket from under $30,000, while Clinton won it, Trump increased the traditional Republican vote in that segment by about 16%. In the income from 30 to 50,000, while Clinton narrowly won it, again, Trump increased Republican about 4%. So overall, about 20% increase in poor and low-paid workers. So how do you explain that?
I think he spoke to their issues in a visceral, very easily understandable way when it came to economic decline, specifically trade. And I think that it was very tough for the Clinton campaign to make a credible case that she was on their side. And so, and there was because her husband, and she was part of it, did NAFTA. It was clear she was part of the Obama administration's free trade policy, which resulted in the TPP, which she had called the gold standard. And so ultimately what happened was she couldn't overcome her own unfavorables and the lack of trust among those voters unless they were pretty hardcore Democrats. And I think that's what you saw. You saw those with allegiances. This is not an ideological decision on the part of white workers. This is a visceral reaction to a huge economic and cultural decline in their communities. And so they don't look at it maybe in the way that more political people do, where, oh yeah, here's my set of policies and ideologies that I adhere to and I vote on the basis of. No, it's like, this guy didn't get my job back, the plant still left, my kids are hooked on heroin, and so I want someone else. And I don't really know exactly what that guy's going to do, and I certainly don't take it literally, all the crap he says. But he's different, he's not a politician, so why not?
I don't understand how President Obama and Podesta, a group that seems so politically savvy and got him elected against, in some ways, many odds, first black president and such, and against the Clinton machine, could be so stupid in their electoral plan here. But it's not really stupid. It goes to who they are in character. And what I mean by this is, instead of fighting for that working class vote and fighting for more of the dispossessed people's vote, they were appealing to people who have done well since the crash. They wanted those Republicans to come over, because whenever Obama spoke, it was this achievement, that achievement, this achievement. Things are going so great. Look at how great my administration has been. And then Hillary, more or less, is an extension of defending that legacy.
That's right.
And the truth is, it's been great for people that are doing well. The upper income brackets, if you had money to put in the stock market the last few years, you've been doing great. And they went after that vote and seeded people who have been suffering. We know this number that, was it 90% of the post-07-08 income increase went to 1% of the population.
Yes.
And they're going after people that are in on the gravy train, and then thinking that traditional Republicans who want lower taxes, and that's why they're Republicans, somehow they're going to flip to Clinton, just as crazy man Trump. I mean, it goes to who their soul is,
Well, it's interesting. I think it also goes to what you mentioned, Paul, the legacy. Because President Obama couldn't see his legacy being carried on unless it was Hillary Clinton. And he saw Bernie Sanders as somewhat of a challenge from the left, but Bernie wasn't defending the Affordable Care Act. Bernie wasn't defending trade policy.
Well,
no, I mean, he was campaigning on Medicare for all.
yeah, he said we need to go further.
Well, he said, he said the Affordable Care Act's fine, but what we need is Medicare for all. And she said, we'll never have Medicare for all. And it became a real debate point, a real difference. And of course, Obama had chosen not to do that. So I do think legacy figured into it, but what's really striking, and to your point, is that these voters that you just talked about who voted for Trump voted for Obama because he was the agent of change.
More in the working class.
The working class voters.
And
I'm talking about
more educated,
not the Republican ones.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, the white working class that you mentioned earlier voted for Obama more than they voted for Hillary, as you said, because Obama was the agent of change.
Or
and Trump is
seen as such.
Seen as such. Yeah. Right, let's be clear. Yeah. Let's be clear. He wasn't the agent of change as soon as Geithner was Treasury Secretary. Right?
Even
before, he
in
won the Wall
primaries.
Street primary, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
He got all his money, his seed money from Wall Street, and that carried forward, right? Yeah. But right, in the case of this issue, I think it has to do primarily with legacy. And for some reason, he decided that Biden wasn't as viable as Secretary Clinton, Vice President Biden. And I don't.
Well, maybe that was the deal.
Yeah.
You know, the deal when the Clintons came out and helped him get elected, the deal was quid pro, and
right.
And he was following through on the deal.
But the most interesting dynamic in some ways, is the one between Obama and Trump. How now we hear this, that President Obama is going to convince Donald Trump to do things. Like, because he met with President Obama, he backed off on complete repeal of the Affordable Care Act. And that these two agents of change, perceived, have something in common.
Yeah, I mean, he in fact was saying that before the meeting with Obama. Trump has been saying that he would let people with conditions. What's the terminology?
Yeah, the pre-existing condition.
Conditions.
Yeah, and keeping kids up to 26 on their parents' plan. Right, you're right. But they use the occasion of the Obama-Trump meeting to characterize it.
So we talked a little bit. We talked about this in the last interview I did about last week. But I need to return to it. How profoundly weak most of the trade unions are. And never mind having influence in the non-organized sections of the working class, and these are mostly who voted, although not only. We know there's certainly in Ohio and Michigan, if not more, other places, a lot of unionized workers voted for Trump. But even their own members, there's like no political education goes on except a kind of blind loyalty to the Democratic Party. And then when you have the Democratic Party, essentially neoliberalism and all the harsh measures that have come, harsh effects, then the union leaders become the defenders of the status quo.
Exactly. And that's exactly what happened, Paul. They were defending an untrustworthy candidate. And they were put in a situation of having to tell their members, believe what she said most recently. And that, unless you're really loyal, right, to the Democrats, that's a tough sell. And so those who weren't as loyal, they couldn't convert. And they're used to converting, as we talked about last time. They're used to converting folks who start more skeptical of the candidate and then move them toward that candidate over the course of the campaign. And that didn't happen this time, in large part because she couldn't overcome her own unfavorables and the issue of lack of trust. So you just couldn't, and then she didn't, the Clinton campaign did not go to Wisconsin, right? They did not have a program, really, a set of programs. They went around and said, okay, this is the most progressive platform in history, and then they would talk about the various social liberal aspects of it, which were important. But at the heart of the economics, it was not a progressive message, precisely because it was like, hey, things are going pretty well, we're going to continue that, and yeah, we got to fix a few problems. But the core economic message was vague and uncertain compared to Trump's very simple and straightforward message about a rigged system that has screwed workers and destroyed jobs in the Rust Belt.
And if she had said anything like that, nobody would have believed her.
Exactly. So she was in a rock and a hard place. And so the problem and the mistake that Labor made was not endorsing the pro-labor candidate in the primaries who could have competed with a Trump on economics and competed for those votes.
So we're talking about almost all the major unions with the exception of yours, the nurses, communication workers, transit, and the postal workers. Is there anyone else?
Yeah, and the United Electrical Workers and the ILWU.
Okay, so that's like 5 or 6.
5 or 6, yeah.
Are there any forces in those other unions that are more like the leadership of these 5 or 6 unions?
Yes.
Like, are we going to see a big fight now in the unions, that the leaders who kind of help elect Trump indirectly, are they going to be held accountable somehow?
Well, I don't know about that, but I think that they will be under a lot of pressure because there was the Labor for Bernie network that got hundreds of locals around the country, locals from internationals that had endorsed, in some cases, Secretary Clinton to endorse Bernie Sanders at the local level. AFSCME, for example, in Seattle. Seattle is obviously a hotbed of resistance to President Trump. So you even have locals of the IBEW who endorsed Bernie. So there's going to be an effort to bring that labor network together and create a political force that can initiate more militant, economic populist demand for justice movement within the unions. And you take issues like Medicare for all. We don't have to settle for the ACA anymore. We can demand a real solution, improve Medicare for all. We don't have to settle for just killing the TPP, but we can actually reorganize trade policy. We can't just settle for a kind of facile position on climate. We have to really talk specifically about green jobs and how you specifically transition energy industry workers to a different comparable set of jobs and what that actually takes. Those are the kinds of things what you would say the progressive or left elements of labor need to address directly.
So there's some meetings coming up this week, actually. We'll probably publish this on Friday, and on Friday is this is today's Monday, so Friday is the meetings.
Yeah.
Talk about what's happening, because there's different groups of sort of progressives getting together
right.
under different locales.
That's right. So the People's Summit Network, the folks that National Nurses United worked with, People's Action, Progressive Democrats of America, other organizations, Food and Water Watch and so forth, A Million Hoodies for Justice, Movement for Justice. A number of organizations are getting together in Washington to talk about how do we continue the program of the People's Summit to demand people and planet first and stand for equality and justice. And what the nurses say to that is, how do we heal America? Because obviously our country is ripped apart and the economic injustices have come home in a powerful way to create a very potentially reactionary government. So how do we confront all that? So that's what we're going to talk about, the People's Summit Network, and we're going to move to another People's Summit event that can bring these folks together. We've also got other folks focused on the 2018 election, specifically around Working Families Party, Move On, Democracy for America, and People's Action. So we're taking very seriously. It appears that the Republicans are within one state legislature of having 3/4 of the states under their control to push constitutional amendments. We're really on the precipice at the state government level. So there's going to be a real emphasis on that in 2018. And then we're looking to Vision 2020, right? And Senator Sanders, he certainly has staked out a claim to take on President Trump in 2020. Obviously, there are other possibilities, but we need to build to that point where we can organize on a offensive basis between now and 2018 and between 2018 and 2020, so we can actually turn the country around.
This issue of the state legislatures is very important, not just the question of a constitutional amendment, which is very important, but the fact that the far right, essentially, has taken over most of American electoral politics.
Right.
The Senate, the House, the President, majority of the state legislatures. Where the hell is the union movement in all this? And for whatever, the Democratic Party. I mean, this is...
Well, there's no coincidence, Paul, that the union movement was severely crippled by Scott Walker's reforms, so-called, in Wisconsin in 2011. And then in 2016, a Republican wins the state with white working class votes, many of whom probably were former union members, or at least some of whom. So there's a direct relationship there. And Michael Kazin has a piece in Dissent about this, that the real source of Trump's victory is the decline of the union movement. Because there used to be union halls. There used to be not 12% or 7% in the private sector now of workers in a union, but it used to be 30%. And that huge difference accounts for a lot of the miseducation that has occurred among workers. So where are the unions? They're under assault. They're now saying they're going to hunker down, and it's wrong. It is absolutely the opposite. It has to be that we are going to mobilize on our issues. We're going to find those issues. We're going to talk to those Republican voters or those working class voters who didn't vote for Secretary Clinton, who went to Trump, and we're going to engage them on their issues, and we're going to move them to our position.
But do they not also have to start being honest? And what I mean by honest, this defense of the Obama years, all throughout the Obama years. I mean, I remember in the first couple of years, I interviewed Sweeney from the FLCIO, and he's saying, you know, we're going to get EFCA, the Employee Free Choice Act. We're going to get it. And I said, really? You're going to get it. And we talked about it, and I said, and if you don't get it, then what? I'll eat my shoe, but it isn't going to happen. I still haven't seen him eat the shoe.
Yeah.
And they don't even, you know, Obama and the Democratic Party leadership don't even bring EFCA forward when they control both houses. That's right. And this, you know, slavish connection to the Democratic Party leadership and the defense of Obama, and it's all justified by, well, because we have to, or the far right will take over. Well, how did that work for you?
So far right. Their strategy to prevent the far right taking over has resulted in the far right taking over.
That's my point.
Exactly.
You got Trump as a result of that.
That's right.
So are they not aware of this in their own interest, even as big labor leaders?
No.
Their own unions are getting decimated by this logic.
Paul, their view was expressed to President Obama: if you succeed, we'll succeed. That was what they said to him. They have been an arm of the Democratic Party, and for precisely the reason you said, because it could be worse. But now that it is worse, the response hasn't changed. The response is to hunker down, you know, but not to initiate. What really they should be trying to figure out is, how could we move workers that we represent into a militant posture that we could carry out actions to change the political dynamic in the country.
Well, the next meeting of the AFL-CIO...
They've already met since the election.
They have. And
Yeah,
Roseanne DeMauro, who's the executive director, she's the vice president
Yes.
of the AFL-CIO.
Yes.
You know, and I know she's on the same page you are, and the union is. So does she stand up and say these things to these people? And
she's known for being a very straight talker in those forums. So it's not that they haven't had the opposing perspective presented. And in fact, the actions of Roseanne and the other labor leaders to endorse Bernie, and Roseanne in particular, to be out there for him and continue to work with him, is a sign that we're not going to just go along with that, you know, approach. But within the AFL-CIO, the government worker unions do tend to dominate. And there are many aspects of Trump's program that appeal to the building trades. Particularly, I mean, they're on that side of pro-pipeline, for example. They're certainly pro-infrastructure. So you can see that there are going to be a lot of divisions. And you can imagine a President Trump going after these sectors individually at different times. And so the unification of the labor movement and a common defense strategy is also important. I don't want to say we only play offense, because there are things he can do with executive orders and so forth in the federal government. But it's really a sea change. It's a fundamentally different way of looking at politics in the world that's required. And whether they will actually do that, we haven't seen that level of introspection yet.
Okay, we're going to continue the discussion in a part 2, so please join us for part 2 with Michael Lighty on the Real News Network, and look forward to seeing you then.